Video we will be talking about the dependency injection in typical .NET ASP.NET Core Web API. So typically, I took an example of three-tier architecture in which a user will interact with some user layer, and then it will send a data to the business layer, and then business layer send data to the repository layer. Okay, so this is typical flow. You will figure out maybe it is entire three-tier, two-tier architecture. In specific to our example, there will be a controller classes where a user via Swagger or Postman will be interacting with the controller class endpoint. Then that data will be sent to the service or manager. Sometimes it is called a processor class. That layer data will be sent, and from there that again the data will be sent to the repository layers whether it will interact with the databases or some kind of APIs, depends on the logic. So basically we'll be having three tiers. One is for the controller classes, one is for service or manager classes, one is for the repository classes. And so like each class will create an object of the next class. Let's say service class want to invoke some methods from the repository classes, then service class should hold the object of the repository class, and likewise the controller class wanted to invoke methods from the service or manager classes, then it should create object of the service class in the controller class. So this is called a tight coupling. Let me explain with you example. Let's say we create a payment controller, payment service and payment repository, three classes. So we need to create payment repository object into the payment service and payment service object into the payment controller class if you wanted to achieve this kind of architecture. And in that way it will be like tightly coupled. What I mean by tightly coupled is you will create class, you will create object of the concrete class where you wanted to use it. So in that way these tiers are tightly bound to each other. Okay, so we can achieve loose coupling there by introducing interfaces. If you see here, I used a payment controller, but it will hold a payment interface reference variable. It may have multiple implementations like payment service, payment manager or whatsoever. Again, then it will go to the third layer, which in the repository I'll create a repository interface for the either implementation with the UPI payment or credit payment, debit. You can assume any example. So in the repository typically it will interact with the databases like SQL database, NoSQL or any cloud database. So that kind of implementation you can provide by defining the methods into the interface. So I'll directly jump into the coding part and we'll show you example for the same, and then we'll try to use the dependency injection in this same example. So I'll create payment controller, then payment interface and payment repository. So let me deep dive into Visual Studio. I will be creating a web API. So ASP.NET Core Web API I am selecting. I'll click on next. So I have some sample application name to this application, and I'm using the default controller methods and top level statement. I'm not using that, using .NET 8 version. So you can use any version of .NET 8. So we'll create this project for ASP.NET Core Web API, and in that we'll try to create these three layers what we mentioned, controller layer, service layer and repository layer first, and then we'll add the interfaces into that. So our project is created. You can see we got a built-in controller, dependencies for this project, app setting, program.cs, the entry point. So what I'll do is I'll create few more folders here, like one for service layer, one for repository layer. So right click on the project, add new folder. So we'll create a service. Let me zoom it here a bit. I will add one more folder like a repository. Okay, So this is something like what we have achieved in the three-tier architecture I was talking about. The controller classes will be go into the controller folder, service layer classes will be go into service folder, repository classes will go into the repository folder. And now I'll create interface into this second service layer, and will create interface into the third layer. So in the second layer of the service class, I'll create one interface, add new class, and here you will see the interface. Okay, so the name I'll provide, typically the interface name start with I in .NET, and this is a standard practice to use the interface naming convention. So like I will mention the iPayment service is my interface. So interface has been created, you can see, and we'll add method later here. Let me add right away. Public void do payment method, I will add it in service layer. So this will take one, let's say, integer amount parameter for the payment, and I'll create one more interface into the repository layer. Right click, add new class, and here I'll choose the interface. It will be like I payment repository. So I'll add the same method, public void pay method I will add, let's say, and it will take integer amount. Okay, so up till now we have created this interface, and the payment controller. We need to add this. Let's add the payment controller. I'll add the at last. Let's implement the payment service class from the iPayment interface, and then we'll implement the UPI and credit payment in the repository interface. So first I'll go to payment service. So in the second layer I have interface. I'll create a new class, add class payment service. So this class will be implemented from the interface I payment service. So you will see the error now, because in the payment service interface we have the method do payment. We need to provide the implementation for this in the payment service class. So let's provide the implementation for that. So we can add the implementation here. What I'll create is I'll create constructor for this one. So I'll create a public constructor and a do payment method. Same I will create in the repository layer. From here, like we have UPI payment repository and credit payment repository. I'll create two classes. I'll add the classes for UPI payment first. Repository. So this will be implemented from the iPayment repository. See, again it will show the error because you need to provide the implementation for the pay method which has been declared into this interface. So I'll create a constructor for this one as this class as well. Public UPI payment repository. Constructor is taking no parameters. Okay, so I have provided this one, and in this one I'll just write system.console.write line payment done using the UPI method for amount let's say we wanted to provide the amount as well, whatever we have received. Okay, and I'll provide the new, so like we have implemented from this payment repository UPI, we'll implement the credit payment repository class as well. I'll right click on the repository layer, add new class, credit payment repository. So again, like in the picture, we implement this credit payment repository from iPayment repository. So I'll mention that. So this class should implement methods present in the iPayment repository. So we'll get error, we need to provide the interface method implementations. So I have provided that, and in this one what we'll write is the payment done using credit method for amount. Okay, that's the only change, and optionally you can create a constructor for this one as well. Public so I have created a constructor. Now our third layer is ready. Basically this one is ready. This one we need to link this and this two. So I'll create a reference variable of iPayment repository in the payment service class. So in the payment service, this is our second layer, I'll create a reference variable of that. So iPayment repository equal to, so let's say variable name, I'll give payment repository, and here I'll invoke that method payment repository dot pay, and I'll send the amount whatever we have received. Okay, and this reference variable will inject using the dependency injection. Let me provide the constructor dependency injection. So this keyword will be used to point out the properties or methods of this particular class. So I'm setting the payment repository, so whoever pass this constructor, parameterized constructor, this object, that will be set to this particular reference variable. Now let me check, this is perfect, we have credit and UPI mode. Now we'll add the controller layer. So I'll add new controller, let's say payment controller we'll add. I'll click on the common API empty controller I'm choosing. I'll mention payment controller, add it. So up till now we created a payment controller, we need to link payment with the second layer, and we have linked the second layer with the third repository layer. So in the payment controller, I'll have a HTTP, let's say get method, public action result. This will use to return a generic result from this method, and let's say payment method is do transaction. So this will method I have implemented, and let's provide the route as well. So I'm using HTTP verb, sometimes it's called as HTTP method, sometimes HTTP verb, one of these are same. So do transaction, and let's say we'll pick up one amount parameter from the route. So earlier in video I explained how to get variables from the route from headers. You can check that video as well. So I'm picking the amount parameter, and I'll provide one. So let's return okay, from this one, just normally returning this one. And you can create a controller using shortcut, just type ctur and hit enter. The controller will be created for this one. Now we have added this layer as well, controller layer. We need to link it with the second layer. Then I need to create a reference variable of second into the payment controller. So I'll create a reference variable I payment service, and I'll use the constructor dependency injection for this one. Okay, this dot payment service is equal to, let's pick up parameter I payment service equal to payment service. So I use the constructor dependency injection. So from the controller layer, basically we will be invoking the methods from this one, the second layer. So let's invoke so the second layer object is a payment service what we have, dot do payment is the method what we, and I'm passing the amount property to that. So you can check if you go to this right click definition, you will land up into the iPayment service implementation. So what are the implementation this iPayment service hold? Basically it will hold only one, which is a payment service. It will come to this do payment method in the payment service. From here it can either go to the credit payment repository or UPI payment repository, like what we have implemented in example. From this one it will go to the UPI or credit payment repository. Okay, so this structure we have completed. Okay, now it's time to create inject the dependencies of these classes what we have created. So typically what you can do in the .NET is, there is this container iService collection. Using that you can inject the dependencies of the classes. So let me show you. So basically there will be a service collection class which is implemented from iService collection. This will hold whatever the metadata objects for entire application classes what you have. Okay, so and there will be a service provider class which is implemented from iService provider. This will be used to fetch that metadata objects, and then you can use this. Basically this example is I tried to get the logger object from this service collection with the help of service provider, but in this case you can get any objects what we have. So dependency can be injected in three ways, like singleton. So what mean by singleton is this will create only one instance in this service container for that particular class throughout the application lifecycle. There is another way which is scoped dependency injection. What happens in this case is, for each HTTP request you will get the new object of this dependency class that you have injected in service container. And there is one more transient which is used in the multi-threading application. So in our program .cs, so in the builder.services, this is particularly that container. So you can inject the dependencies here. So I'll inject builder.services.add. I'll inject all the dependencies as scoped. So for first, let's say this dependency iPayment service, whenever the iPayment reference variable will be used, the payment service implementation will be provided. I'll mention that. So whenever somebody using iPayment service, provide the implementation for the payment service. So I injected the dependency for the payment service class for this reference variable. So I will create one more, and here for the iPayment repository I'll inject like, so in this diagram we have the UPI payment repository. First I'll inject this one, and I'll show you next time the example of the credit one. So first add scoped. Here you can see the syntax. You need to write the interface name and the implementation what you want. Okay, so credit repository, let's see the UPI payment repository first, implementation. So I have injected that, and now I'll go to the controller. I'll add a breakpoint in the controller class. So I'll go to the service class, I'll add a breakpoint here as well, and in the repository UPI payment I'll add a breakpoint at this last. Okay, so I'll start the application, and with the help of the Swagger we will invoke these endpoints and we'll see the data flow in this case. So you can see my application is starting, and it will open a Swagger UI in the browser. So using that we will see the example of the dependency injection. So you can see my server is started, a command prompt or console window opened. On that you can see the server is listening for HTTP request on 7223 and for HTTP request on 5272, and also a Swagger UI is opening. You can see API payment due transaction amount. This is the endpoint, that's what we created. If I go to controller class, so this is API slash whatever the, so this will be the annotation, and what it will do is it will pick up the class name and remove the suffix the controller, and this will be the route of the endpoint, and we are picking a dynamic parameter from the route. So the same thing we can see API payment due transaction and dynamic parameter. So I'll try this out. I'll send like 100 rupees payment I wanted to do. When I click on the execute button, so it will go to the controller class. So the amount value you can see it should be 100 now. Okay, so I'll continue. So it went to this payment service class. Okay, so the flow is like something from the payment, from the user endpoint it invoked, it came to the payment controller, then it went to the this reference variable hold the payment service implementation. That's what we have provided in the program.cs dependency injection. You can see whenever the iPayment service reference variable will occur in the code, just use the payment service implementation. Okay, so when I'll click on the continue, so it will go to the UPI payment repository, because that's what we have specified. Whenever the iPayment repository reference variable using in the code, just use the this implementation UPI payment repository. So in the payment service you can see iPayment repository, this reference variable will be used. This will hold the UPI payment repository, and in the UPI payment repository basically we have mentioned that the payment done using the UPI for amount. So this will be logged on to the console. You can see the payment done using the UPI method for 100 value, right? So this is something for the UPI mode. Now what I'll show you is for the credit mode, or we can add like if else condition here as well. So let's say if let's say we wanted to credit now, our iPayment repository will hold the implementation for the credit payment repository. Now let me start the server again. Now if you do the payment should be done using the credit payment repository method. So the fresh server is starting on my window. The server has been started, and you can see the endpoint. I'll do the payment and try it out. Let's say amount I have specified 150 now. I'll hit on continue. So this will go to the controller class. From here it will go to the payment service class, which is this thing. From the controller it came to the payment service. From this layer it will go now to this one, credit payment repository, because in the program.cs, that's the dependency we have specified, credit payment repository series. I'll hit continue, and basically we'll see the log on the application, payment done using the credit mode for this amount. So this has been logged from the payment service. This one, it will went to the payment repository of the credit service, and this log has been done on that. So this is what for the dependency injection. So the main thing to digest from this one is, like, you can create an interface and their implementation. You can add like dependency like this, or let's say there is a concrete class and you want to the class has been not been implemented using the method. So then for the concrete class, you can directly specify this add scope and the class name. So this class object will be created into this container, okay. So I'll link this notes in the description of the video. Do let me know if you need any videos further into the comments section. Thank you.